None of the simulations covered this.
How can we be out of fuel? The crude is cooling rapidly towards ambient.
At this viscosity, we're gonna have serious trouble pumping.
Has anyone heard when the pumps are restarting?
No idea, they just told us to wait.
What do you mean you're closed? I've been waiting for hours.
I'm sorry, sir. There is nothing we can do.
We're down to 90 minutes of reserves. Initiate the grounding sequence now. Cancel all departures until further notice.
The grounded aircraft are just the start. A single break in the supply chain means the refueling trucks sit empty. The fuel
Oil reserves are critical. Unit 4 is shutting down.
We're losing stability. Shed the load on the residential feeders.
The refinery shutdown sequence begins as operators make the decision to begin an orderly shutdown after confirmation that their crude oil
Unit 3 feed rate reduced to 0. Depressurization sequence holding steady.
Checklist item 412 confirmed. Isolating the main heat exchangers now.
We've lost pressure in segment 12. It's draining fast.
The refinery is running on fumes now. There's nothing more we can do.
Raw material supply interrupted indefinitely. We have to power down.
Acknowledged. Initiating shutdown sequence.
What we have just witnessed marks a historic turning point. To understand the full implications, we must look beyond the flares and into the data.
Place that consumption for approximately 90 days in theory, but that the theory assumes an orderly drawdown of those reserves.
This refinery is not simply a place where crude oil is converted into fuel, but a system of extraordinary complexity.
What actually happens next after the first hours shown in the cold open sequences? The answer, understanding.
What follows will take the viewer inside the oil infrastructure to understand how it works at normal operation before showing how it fails.
Lindeth, the question in this documentary's title is not rhetorical, but genuinely open. The answer depends on factors not obvious from...
The oil does not simply flow up when a hole is drilled, but must be actively lifted from the reservoir by a...
Optimizing production from a hydrocarbon reservoir requires continuous monitoring and adjustment of production parameters.
The engineering sophistication of these systems, noting that each wellhead assembly must maintain a pressure seal against the reservoir.
The pump jack is the most visible symbol of oil production, but its simplicity is deceptive.
The crude oil gathering system collects production from individual wells and routes it to the central processing facility.
Everything visible in this frame represents the starting point of a journey that each barrel of crude oil must make.
Pipelines are the most efficient method of moving large volumes of crude oil over long distances.
The engineering challenge of maintaining the integrity of thousands of kilometers of buried steel pipe under continuous operating pressure.
The precision of pipeline hydraulic management, noting that maintaining the correct pressure profile across a long-distance pipeline requires continuous adjustment of pumping station output.
Leak detection is one of the most important safety and environmental protection functions of pipeline management.
I think it's free maintenance is pipeline maintenance assessment deals decade operating life of this pipelines and continual major maintenance investment.
The network of pipelines that carries crude oil from fields to refineries and refined products from distribution.
Pumping stations are the muscle of the pipeline system. Without them, crude oil could not overcome the friction and elevation changes. Pump reliability is the critical variable in pipeline throughput, noting that an unplanned pump failure at a remote...
The operational intelligence that modern pumping station control systems provide. The data available allows much more.
The emergency response capable pumping station is demonstrated as the operations team executes emergency shutdown drill.
Energy self-sufficiency is an important design principle of remote pumping stations. They must be able to generate their own power reliably.
The significant industrial infrastructure investment whose reliable operation is essential to the continuous flow of crude oil that the modern world depends on. The refinery is the transformation point in the petroleum supply chain, where crude oil is converted into the specific products that consumers actually use. The distillation column separates crude oil into fractions based on boiling points. The lightest components leave at the top, the heaviest at the bottom.
Conversion processing is the key to refinery economics, noting that the ability to convert the heavy fractions that distill.
The level of sulfur in road diesel is now measured in parts per million, and achieving this specification requires.
Blending is a sophisticated optimization operation, satisfying the quality specifications of many different products while minimizing the consumption of valuable components.
The refinery is a hub in a distribution network. It does not simply produce products, but must dispatch
strategic petroleum reserves as the insurance policy of the global energy system, noting that most major oil importing nations maintain government-owned strategic reserves.
Storage tank management as a specialized discipline, noting that the safe and efficient management of large petroleum.
These enormous underground cavities dwarf surface tank storage. A single large salt cavern can hold tens of millions. Terminal control is the nerve center of the oil distribution system. The decisions made in this room affect the availability.
Digital asset management is a fundamental capability of modern oil infrastructure. The ability to know precisely where
What is visible in this aerial view is a significant fraction of the buffer stock that stands between the world's continuous consumption.
Pipeline network flexibility is an important emergency capability. Modern pipeline systems are designed with interconnections as
strategic reserve drawdown is a deliberate policy choice that carries both benefits in the form of immediate supply relief and costs in the form of a reduced buffer.
Priority alert in Sector Gamma. Rerouting supply.
Confirmed. Essential services secured.
The emergency systems visible in this sequence represent decades of investment in infrastructure resilience and operational preparedness.
Pressure decline as one of the earliest indicators of flow system stress, noting that a pipeline that is not being replenished from upstream will eventually show declining.
We are approaching the operational floor. Below this minimum throughput, the unit processes become unstable, requiring a complete shutdown.
The nature of the cascade nature of infrastructure. Noting that the connections that makes if there's no
Inventory drawdown as the visible manifestation of the supply-demand imbalance that the supply interruption has created. As long as dispatch continues at the rate the market demands, the gap grows.
This is a structural disruption, not temporary. Declare level 1 emergency.
Activate full response protocols now.
What is visible in this composite display is not the failure of any single piece of infrastructure, but the first visible.
I'm sorry, but we have to suspend all deliveries until further notice. The fuel reserves are critical. Attention all stations. This is the captain. Due to critical fuel levels, we are anchoring immediately. Stand by for updates.
Industrial shutdowns are cascading across the manufacturing sector as fuel and feedstock shortages spread far beyond the primary.
The economic destabilization is shown through the financial market responses to the spreading industrial shutdowns as trading platforms.
What is visible in this aerial view is the beginning of the adaptation that cities must make to operate with dramatically reduced access to liquid transportation fuels.
As governments declared energy emergencies, the military was deployed to secure remaining petroleum infrastructure.
The geopolitical dimension of the oil supply crisis, noting that a severe shortage of a resource as fundamental as petroleum inevitably activates.
Military operations first, emergency services second, critical infrastructure third, all other uses.
The concentration of purchasing power in a few wealthy nations and the absence of adequate supply to meet even reduced.
The pattern visible in this composite is the transformation of an economic and industrial crisis into a geopolitical one.
The process requires careful management to avoid equipment damage. and the time required to bring a complex refinery from cold.
Bay 4, move faster. We can't afford delays.
This is staging. We have 2 electric buses charging now. ETA 10 minutes.
Understood. Keep them coming.
We face a critical choice: international cooperation versus national competition.
Minister, we must secure the supply chain now.
The energy transition as a strategy that the crisis has dramatically accelerated, noting that the investment decisions and technology deployments that would normally take years.
What is visible in this composite is a civilization mobilizing all available resources to manage a challenge that it was.
The world is losing its energy infrastructure faster than it can restore it, and the outcome depends on whether the rate of restoration. The longer the supply interruption continues, the more difficult the eventual restart becomes, because deteriorating equipment.
The aggregate of millions of individual adaptation decisions by ordinary people determines whether a society maintains.
The mobilization is total. This fundamental infrastructure challenge will determine the very outcome of modern civilization.
With the discourse. What is visible in this aerial view is a civilization that has not collapsed, but has been profoundly transformed.
The scenario we described has now unfolded. The systematic restoration is underway, confirming our analysis of what this means for the global supply chain.
The events shown have taught us that the world's dependence on oil is deeper, more pervasive, and more difficult to replace quickly than most people understood before.
Recovery as a process that is measured in weeks and months rather than days, noting that even with the most effective possible emergency response.
The infrastructure that took build can fail in days, but requires months to restore.
The crisis has accelerated investments in energy resilience and alternatives that were previously considered too expensive.
The lessons for future resilience are drawn from specific investments in infrastructure redundancy, strategic reserves, and alternative energy.
The question has a nuanced answer. Survival at some reduced level is likely, but the cost in economic damage, human suffering, and structural change is so large.
The role of the oil infrastructure workers in both the crisis and the recovery is acknowledged, as the narrator spits.
The international dimension of the recovery is addressed, as the narrator speaks about the degree to which the recovery from a global oil supply disruption.
The crisis as an inadvertent accelerator of the energy transition that was already underway, but moving to
reserve replenishment as a strategic priority of the post-crisis period, noting that the world that exits the crisis with depleted strategic reserves is more vulnerable.
As refineries adopt alternative feedstocks and networks are interconnected, we see that resilience investment is the most
useless. Oil is the backbone of modern civilization, impacting our built environment, food production, and manufacturing.
The day oil stops flowing has shown the world not just what it loses when the flow stops, but what it must build.